Hello everybody, this is Fernando for Godzilla Movie News. Still a little slow when it comes to the latest Godzilla news, so I thought I wanted to, create another new video from my Cryptids and Monsters series, this time illustrating another close encounter with a cryptid/monster that isn't really fairly known, but nonetheless provides a pretty interesting case. And what I'm talking about in this case is the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, which had to do with some goblins, quote unquote, that terrorized the poor family back in the 1950s. This is a story that I've never heard of before. I saw it on one of the YouTube channels that was it was a show that was uploaded on YouTube. I can't seem to find the link anymore, unfortunately, but in any case, I'll try my best to describe exactly what happened, and I'll include pictures of what happened to this, poor family and what they saw. What's very unique about this is that many consider this case of goblins, quote unquote, to actually be one of the most well-known, at least when it comes to the concept of a close encounter of the third kind, one of the most well-known cases around, because it involves so many different extraterrestrials and so many different actual people getting an encounter with these aliens. Now, the term goblins has been used mainly because of the way they looked, but to all extents, this is essentially a case of aliens or extraterrestrials visiting a family. And it pretty much set the foundation for other visits by other aliens going forward. So a lot of interesting stuff that happened. So it all started, it looks like it was on August 21st, 1955. There was a family called the Suttons that lived over in Pennsylvania, a very rural area, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And this family, there were a total of 11 people involved that night of August 21st. One of the members, a guy named Billy Ray Taylor, noticed that there was no running water. And so this was at night, around 7 p.m. or so, and so he decided to go out and fetch some water. And when he did, he started observing strange lights in the sky. Unusual stuff. Not the kind of stuff one usually associates with, let's say, meteors or other forms like shooting stars or the stars and so forth. So he started to get a little suspicious, especially because it looked like this stuff was landing at a nearby location. He said, quote unquote, it featured lights on its side that had all the colors of the rainbow. And the minute he saw that, he ran back inside, started telling the rest of the family members, all telling them, hey, he just saw a flying saucer, but nobody believed him. About an hour later, we're talking about 8 p.m. or so, still night, of course, everybody inside the house suddenly began hearing strange and unexplained noises. Even the dog that was in the residence started barking pretty loud, but then it hid right under the house, and it would not come out. And so two of the family members, again Billy Ray Taylor and another guy named Lucky Sutton, decided that, hey, they better go check out what's going on. So armed with shotguns, they went out. They exited the premises of the house, went out to all the trees that were nearby. About 20 feet away, they suddenly saw something rattling some of the trees nearby. And what emerged can only be looked and described as what you see a picture of here. Now, this picture is an official picture drawn by somebody from the U.S. military or the Air Force. My apologies. It was a gentleman by the name of Gary F. Hodson, who was sent to interview all the family members, since essentially they witnessed what had occurred, and based on what they described, this is what he said they look like. And so this is a good example, essentially, of what the aliens look like, the closest one that we have, at least, to their interpretation. So they saw this alien climbing towards them. The thing was that the way it approached them, it was not walking towards them. Instead, it seemed to swim in the air towards them. Imagine as if the air itself were water. The alien was using its arms more like a stroke and it was stroking towards them. And no doubt, this freaked the hell out of the men. It would freak me out if I saw something that looked like it was 3 feet tall, not walking towards me, but moving its arms in a strange manner that was slowly getting closer to me and floating in the air all at the same time. So they shot at it. And when they shot at it, they said there was a noise, quote unquote, sounding like bullets being rattled about in a metal drum. So there was some kind of impact. No doubt the bullets, the shotgun pellets, striking something, but not causing any harm to the creature. In fact, when it did that, it immediately flipped over and then fled back into the trees itself. I think the closest approximation one can think of is, if anyone has ever seen the Twilight Zone movie, the one that was done in the 80s, there's that scene where that monster who's on the plane terrorizing one of the poor passengers as it's ripping apart the wings of the plane. When it gets shot at, it flips back and then scurries off, and I think that's what inspired it. But yeah, the alien did this. So the two guys, after shooting that monster, essentially they ran back, and the rest of the family members, of course, were panicking at this point, because what suddenly happened was one of the other aliens, because apparently there were multiple ones now, started peering into the windows at their home. How freaky would that be? Imagine, just staring outside, and all of a sudden you see a face like that staring in back at you. And so everybody's, had guns, and they started shooting at any window where the creatures would pop up. And by this point, there were multiple ones. In fact, the family members, they didn't know the exact numbers, but they were guessing that there were at least 10 or more of these aliens/goblins scurrying about the roof, breaking windows, banging on the roof, banging on the walls, essentially acting in a malevolent manner, because the creatures seemed to realize that, yes, they were freaking out the family, and the more the family was freaking out, the more the creatures decided to turn things up even more so. In fact, it did this so much so that at one point, one of the family members shot one of the aliens point blank, right there. No missing in this case of the alien, but again, it just had no impact. It jumped back, it scurried off, and they continued. About at this point, we're looking several hours into the night. Here's where another interesting aspect of this case comes into play, because not only again were the family members affected, but law enforcement was affected as well. There was a state highway trooper who had apparently saw or heard some reports of some meteor-like objects flying overhead in this area. So they decided to, he was aware of something that was happening. But at about 11 p.m., the family members, they were so much in a terrified mode from these little goblins scaring the hell out of them, that they decided all at once to flee the farmhouse, and all went into their their cars. They ran out, and 30 minutes later they arrived at the police station. And the police chief there, again, somebody else that could be considered not a witness, but somebody that was a participant in this strange scenario, stated that there's no way that these people could have been faking this, because they were frightened beyond reason. He said, quote unquote, they were frightened beyond reason, not ordinary. These were not the people who normally ran to the police. Something frightened them, something beyond their comprehension. And someone else that was a police officer there took the pulse rate of Billy Ray, and it was more than twice normal. So again, if somebody were trying to fake this, not only would they have to have 11 people, essentially the whole family members, acting in such a believable manner that nobody would second guess that they were trying to fake it, but they would also have to elevate their own pulse rate twice as normal, which is again almost impossible to do so. At this point, 20 police officers, all of them, went back to the farmhouse, and they looked through all things. They didn't see any goblins yet, but they did see all the damage that was caused. And according to the police officers, there was so much damage that they were believing that something big happened here. This was something that was so horrible for the family at that time that who would purposely damage their farm and their house this way, other than the fact that they were truly having, these creatures fighting them, and so they were fighting back, and all they saw, unfortunately, was just bullet holes. They did see hundreds, though, of spent shells. The family must have been fighting and shooting for several hours, using who knows how many number of clips, just hundreds and hundreds of bullets. And at the end, investigators did conclude, and this is a direct quote, that these people were sincere and sane, and they had no interest in exploiting the case for publicity. So all they could say is that, hey, something did spook the family. What it was, I don't know, but it was legitimate enough to convince everybody involved, and that was the end of it. Once the police left, the only thing that occurred was that the family stated that the creatures returned. The police left apparently a little after 2 a.m., and the same guy, Billy Ray, fired at them once. Another window was blown apart, and just before dawn, the last of the creatures left, and that was it. No other visit from the aliens after that day, after that horrible night. No other reports of other families experiencing anything, and that was it. So, freaky stuff, no? Imagine there you are at home, just trying to enjoy a good night, and all of a sudden you see these things popping up everywhere and creating horror, absolute horror, knowing that these things, also the idea that these things know that the more scared you are, the more fun it is for them. Interesting little side note trivia on this. Apparently this story drew the interest of Steven Spielberg, who at the time was making or had made Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The studio was wanting another sequel to Close Encounters, but he didn't want a sequel. Instead, he wanted to continue the theme of encounters with aliens, but taking a different path. And he wanted to use this case of the goblins as the basis of his movie, where there would be a family who would be not attacked but maliciously threatened, and essentially have it be a horror film where 11 extraterrestrial aliens would this unfortunate family, they would terrorize this family for a long time. So eventually though, Spielberg changed his mind, and instead of having the aliens be malevolent, he decided that the aliens should be, in this case now down to one, be as friendly and as cute and as personable as possible, and that became E.T. So interesting little side note on that. Anyways, that's the latest story that I have here. Again, if anyone wants to see better, at least a YouTube video related to this in terms of a documentary, check out, try to type in, I think it was taken down, unfortunately, but if I find the link, I'll post it for everybody here, but just type in Hopkinsville Goblin on YouTube, and hopefully you'll be able to find that documentary that I saw. Alright everybody, thanks again. Bye.